we're just letting everyone join and connect to audio. If you're not muted already, if you could just mute, that'd be great, just so we can all keep focused. Okay, lots of you joining, which is lovely. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Bobby. I'm one of the tutors for Study Mind, and I'm currently a medical student at Oxford doing graduate entry medicine. And so today I'm going to talk to you a bit about the application process, how we strategically apply, and all that. But as I said, we'll give it a couple of minutes just to let everyone join. Having some internet issues. That's fine. As far as I'm aware, we are currently live streaming and recording, so you should be able to see the video after the session. Where are we all joining from? Feel free to put it in the chat. Someone's from Surrey. Hi. London. Kenya. Awesome. People are all over the place at the moment. That's amazing. Cyprus as well. Will I be giving advice for mature students looking to apply to undergrad medicine? I definitely will be touching on that, so don't worry about that. Yes, I can give some advice about doing postgrad medicine, not a problem. The focus of the webinar will be on undergraduate, but I will discuss that as well because I have got some experience and I think there will probably be a few of you who are curious to find out a bit more about that alternative pathway. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll get started. Okay, let me just get rid of the Zoom pop-ups. Okay, so we're using Menti today. So if you go to menti.com and enter the code at the top of the screen, I'll also just copy and paste that into the chat for you all. Then we'll be able to interact as well. I'd like to make this really interactive as possible so you will get as much as you can out of the session. Okay. So once you've joined, if you can just use the thumbs up button, that way I can know if people have been able to join. Okay. Perfect. We've got a few of you joining the Menti now. Brilliant. Okay, great. That looks like it's working. So if you can all keep joining and we'll get started on the actual topic of today. So we're going to be thinking about how do you make a strategic application to medicine? Now, some of you may want to know what I mean by strategic, and I guess the point of that is applying to medicine, you have 4 choices on your UCAS application that you're allowed to use to apply for medicine, and the 5th one has to be something else. And we'll talk about that as well today. But what it means is you want to make sure that you are optimizing your chances of getting a place. So we try to pick universities where we've got the best opportunity. And we'll think about that in just a second. Okay. Sorry, I'm still submitting people as we go along. So if you want to join our WhatsApp group, this group link will add you to our sort of announcements group. So you'll get announcements when we're doing webinars and different things that are happening and basically keep you up to date. So if you want to get involved with anything, that's your place to be. So I'll leave that on the screen for just a minute and just check the message in the chat. Where can you apply with average UCAS scores? That's a hard question because it's so much more than just your UCAT. But again, we'll talk about it some more. But don't be disheartened. There are lots of different options. If your UCAT didn't go exactly how you wanted it to go, that's okay. Okay. So, does anyone have any questions before we get started? If you just want to drop them in the chat, or you can raise your hand as well and we can unmute. Okay, I guess no one knows what they want to ask yet. Fine. So yeah, please do join that link and hopefully we'll keep you updated and you'll be able to get some good things out of that. Where you can register for UCAS, so your UCAS account, I'll just copy this link and put it into the chat as well. You just search UCAS on Google and you'll be able to find it pretty easily. Just remember that your deadline for applications is the 15th of October. That never varies, it's the same every single year. Okay, so you want to be making sure your application is submitted on time before the 15th. Unfortunately, if you submit it after that date, you will be rejected. Okay, it's a really harsh cutoff, but it's one of the ways they go about helping to select candidates for interview. Okay, fine. When you fill out your UCAS form, it is really important that you go through it systematically and that you are filling things out accurately. Okay, so one of the universities we'll talk about today has a very strict policy that if you do not fill out the UCAS form correctly, then you, again, unfortunately, are rejected at that pre-interview phase. So we really want to set you up as best as possible so that you don't have that situation. So start filling it in early. You can come back to it, fill in the bits you can at the moment, and fill in the other bits later. Okay. So question to you all, what do you think is the most important for applications? We've got a few things listed here, so I'll let you all answer that whilst I have a look in the chat at some of your questions. How can we improve our UCAT scores if I've been doing lots of questions but not improving? This is tough. I'd say that one of the best ways to improve UCAT is by targeting the techniques, and we do run webinars for live days and also one-to-one tutoring for that if you're interested. But beyond getting that tutoring support, we also have a video series which goes through some of the techniques to approach different questions in verbal reasoning, decision making, etc. So that could be a really good way for you to sort of figure out, am I actually approaching these questions in the best way? Alternatively, it's sort of asking yourself, where am I struggling? And trying again to target that without having a one-to-one conversation. It's quite tricky for me to give you specific advice. But if you're doing lots of questions but not improving, I'd have a look at your technique. I want to know more about interviews and interview question styles and how to best prepare. So today's session won't really be looking at that too much, but we can think about that later. Would there be any specific advice on graduates who have applied before? Who would I need to change my whole personal statement from previous ones? I think in terms of your personal statement, that is something that does need to change to reflect what you've done in the past few years as a graduate, and sort of what you've gained. If you are applying sort of second or third time as a graduate, it may not change as significantly as going from undergraduate to graduate applications, but it doesn't need to be completely different. Okay. However, if you've got advice from your previous applications and they say that actually your personal statement is what needs working on, you may need to rethink that. Someone asked about, are the tutorials with Medic Mind? Yes, so we have tutorials online through the online portal for the different parts of the UCAT. Okay, fine. So I've let you have some time to answer this question. And I'm glad to see that people think the most important thing is actually everything. And I suppose the reason I'm glad for this is that it varies also depending on university. Okay. All of these things add up to the university having essentially a profile of who you are, and they're trying to match you to their university. Okay. They will have their own agenda of what they're looking for, and we'll talk about two particular case examples shortly. But some will prioritize UCAT, some will prioritize A levels and GCSEs, some will completely disregard A levels and GCSEs to start with and use it sort of later in their shortlisting process. So this is why it's important to do your research. If you have an idea of where you might want to apply, go and have a look at their admissions websites. Okay, they'll have all the information that you need to figure out, okay, have I got the best application for this place here? Or what you need to be aiming for if you're applying and you haven't done your A levels yet, for example. Okay. So as I said, we're thinking about how we apply with the best options. Has anyone thought about this at length? Yes. Okay. So people are trying to think about how do I optimize my choices? What are people's backup choices? What's your fifth option on your UCAS? Do you include a fifth option? I see. A lot of people saying blank or no clue. Other people saying biomedical sciences and biomedicine. Okay. Medical science, transfer to medicine, perfectly acceptable as an alternative route, and we'll talk about alternative routes later. Maybe pharmacy, but I wouldn't want to do pharmacy. So this is something to think about as well, is whether or not you invest extra time into a degree, a different degree, and if you enjoy it. But again, we'll get there. Just have a think about what you want to do with that fifth option, because although strategic applications are important for your first four, that fifth one could be that important backup. Okay. So we all know that unfortunately or fortunately, BMAT has been scrapped. So UCAT is the default entrance exam for medical school and dentistry school. Okay. We're going to be focusing on medical school in this webinar, but the same sort of principles apply when you're looking at dentistry schools if you're looking at those. You have three sort of ways that universities use the UCAT score. They use it as a cutoff score, so you have to have achieved a certain number in your UCAT to even be considered for interview, and then they interview everyone above that cutoff score. They could give points and make a list. So again, one of our examples, we'll talk about that. And then they interview maybe the top 10% of that list. Okay. Others use it in conjunction with GCSEs. They look a little bit more holistically at you as a person. Okay. Someone has asked I go back to the QR code, but I will do that towards the end if that's okay. Just so we make sure we go through things. Okay. So some people have talked about physician's assistants as well, and we can think about that later. But going back to UCAT universities, these are sort of the main three ways they use them. And it's important for you to be able to figure out, again, if I'm interested in this university, how are they going to use my bits of information I'm providing them? Okay. So something that we do offer at Medic Mind is university consultations. Okay. And that includes sort of sitting with you one-to-one and going through your options based on your grade, based on your UCAT score, and based on your personal experience, and looking at you as a whole applicant and try to advise you on which are the best universities for you as an individual to apply to. So some people are asking for quite specific advice in the chat. If you're interested in that, we do offer it. Okay. And as you'll see, you sort of go up and up. If you want more time or a written report, even, we can do that for you. And we do have a discount code at the bottom here. Again, I'll just copy that link over to the chat. So these consultations are with our expert tutors, our expert team. So they are people who have advised on many different consultations now with lots of different students. Okay, and they know the university's systems pretty much inside and out. So they're really good at matching you to the universities. In terms of applying for postgrad and strategic applications, be aware it is more competitive, so you may want to consider also applying for an undergraduate course. There are caveats with that, but we'll talk about that soon. This is also a QR code, so if you want to scan this one's to get consultations, and remember you can use that discount code, which was, just to repeat, UNI10 for 10% off. Okay, we can go through things nice and slowly with you and try and optimize things. We'll think about GCSEs shortly, don't worry guys. Okay. I've left that on the screen for a couple of minutes now. So let's move on. As you can see, this is sort of the UCAT breakdown for the last few years. It used to be called the UK CAT. So if you do see that on any sort of older reports, it's the same test. They just scrapped the K. Don't ask me. It's very strange. But anyway, going back to 2019, we can see that there is an increasing number of candidates. So medicine itself is getting more competitive, and there are a few possible reasons for that. Number one, and we'll see some of these trends continue later, but 2021 to sort of 2021 we had a lot more in applications, and that was theorized to be due to sort of COVID and people wanting to find a way into medicine to help, which is lovely. And then we sort of seen a bit of a dip again. So it does fluctuate, but overall still quite competitive. Okay. In terms of average scoring, you can see at bottom, although we've sort of had increases in numbers of people, we've had some dips and some highs. So again, if you want to think about what an average UCAT score looks like, you're looking around 2,500. Okay. And that's your average applicant. And that's sort of reflected as well in your decile breakdown. Okay. So deciles are thinking about essentially top 1% of applicants to bottom 10%. So top 10%, bottom 10%, and it goes up in 10% intervals. So your average is going to be around fifth decile. Okay. Some universities will not accept you if you fall below sort of the bottom two. So if you're in the 8th or 9th decile, so again, just be aware of that. When you leave your UCAT exam, you will have a piece of paper with your decile and your outcome essentially. What's worth doing is just before you apply to double check the deciles and see if anything's changed. If you're sort of sitting it later on, then they'll have a better idea of the deciles. Okay, that's what that said. But overall, I think you can all see and appreciate that we are increasing in what we're expecting. Okay, as an outcome. So someone's asked, is the 9th decile the best? In this situation, yes. So the 9th decile to be your top. If you think of it as the 90% boundary, that might be more useful to think of. So your 10% boundary, your 20%, 30%, so forth. Okay. Excellent. What you might have noticed is that a lot of people do quite badly in verbal reasoning, or not so well compared to the other sections. Now, I know for any people thinking about graduate at Warwick, they do actually want quite a high verbal reasoning score. So again, these are little nuances you need to think about, and you will figure out what goes to the universities you want to apply to by looking at their admissions pages or through consultations. Okay. So how should I go about picking my universities? Number one, know what you have to offer. What are your GCSEs? What are your A levels if you already have them? What are your predicted A levels if you don't already have them? Or the equivalent, so IB, T levels, whatever you might be doing. What work experience do I have? What was my UCAS score? So all this information you fill in on your UCAS application. Do your UCAS score get sent to them separately? That's not something you have to do. But as you're going through this information, it should help you to narrow down what you have to offer. After doing that, if you aren't having a consultation with us, you can find the resources online and go through the medical schools of your interest. Okay. You can look at their admissions pages and decide, okay, do I fit what they're looking for? That's really important because it's not worth applying to a university where you know, if you look at their admissions page, that your UCAT score is not good enough. That's a wasted option. And unfortunately, you only get 4 choices. So you want to make them count. Okay. So that's really important. The other thing is, once you've sort of had an idea of what universities you're thinking about, is go and visit the universities. Open days are really important for a few reasons. One, you'll get the sort of overall vibe of the place, which is sort of the environment, how does it feel to you? Very important in terms of how you're going to fit in socially and also feel comfortable in place. And also you'll be able to ask questions to students who are there at the time, a bit more about the course. Okay. For schools that weigh GCSE heavy, with international student be disadvantaged if I qualifications equivalent to GCSE, but aren't exactly the same. So the scoring will be slightly different, but they will take into consideration if they are equivalent. Okay. And I can talk through what the GCSE numbers would be, and if you know the conversion, then we can talk about that. Fine. So example number one that I wanted to talk to you all about today is Leicester. So Leicester University do a 5-year undergraduate course. It's an A100 if you're looking for the UCAS code. Okay. Now they rank your UCAT, but they also take into consideration your GCSE and A-levels. Would anyone be happy or open to sharing with me their GCSE results and predicted A-levels or whatever you got for A-levels? Okay.
Bobby,
Fine.
I might come
Someone,
in and just give you a set of GCSE grades if that's fine.
yeah,
Um, if that's okay, because I feel like there's such a huge variation, but you know, there's some people who get all nines, like Ari has got all nines in the chat here, which is fantastic, but some are less fortunate with Leicester.
yep,
So let's say, for example, we get all nines in our core subject. So I've got 6 9s, but then I've got 3 8s. So I've got an 8 in geography, 8 in ICT, and 8 in history. But the rest of them are all nines. And then
yes.
I've got UCAT score of 2,760.
So just so everyone knows, that's Asher. He's in the background as someone helping out with Study Mind as well. And the reason I'm asking for that information is that the way Leicester go about it is they assign a numerical rank to each piece of information. So your GCSEs are scored out of 32. Okay, so if we think about the GCSE scores that we were just given, let me just check. So for Leicester, A stars or 8/9s are all given a score of 4. Okay, so we have nines, that's a 4 here from the information we were just given. So we had 6 9s and 3 8s, which would give us 36. Now the maximum you can score in a section is 32. And so if you score technically above that, they'll still set it as 32. So you can't get more than 32. Okay. Now your UCAT score is sort of again like the decile rankings. So they'll assign a number of points to each band, essentially. So for 2,760, the banding would sit it at 27.5 points. So for that section, that person would get 27.5 points. You'd add the 32 from the GCSE, and it'd be a total out of 64. Okay. If I do that very quickly, that person would be scoring 59.5. Now, in recent years, Leicester has been fluctuating a little bit in what their cutoff is, but they assign this number to you based on the information you give them. And then there'll be a number cutoff where everyone above that will be offered an interview. Everyone below that will be rejected at this stage. So last year, that cutoff was 52. So this person would have been comfortably in that boundary of being interviewed, not a problem. But years before that, or the last few years before that, it's been around 58, 59. So that person would just about be in sort of the safe zone, as it were. So that's a combination of things. And it's looking again at both the GCSE and your UCAT score. So this information, you can go onto the Leicester website and get it for what their breakdown is, how they assign those points. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, Bobby. I'm just going to
Yeah.
share my screen really quickly to show students because there is some documents that I found on Leicester's website over here that
Okay.
shows the UCAT cutoffs. This is for 2023. This is also for 2022. So students would come underneath this. Most students would come underneath this home non-graduate section. Bear in mind, everybody has different criteria. So some universities will have a different criteria for internationals, different for graduates. And also, if you're a gap year student, some universities like Leicester in certain years have had in their admissions policies that they will interview you if you scored in the top 20%, as long as you got A star AA, for example. and you got band 1 or 2. But you have to read the fine print. So it's very important you read these statistics. But I'll hand it back to Bobby if that's fine. But I thought it'd be good to share with you guys the exact extracts for that.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you, Asha. So, yes, that's why we care about statistics so much, and that's what we go through when we're doing these consultations with you. Someone is asking about should I resit? So this is something else I wanted to come on to. The general rule of thumb with medical school applications is resits are not accepted unless there are severe, well, substantial mitigating circumstances. Now, with Leicester, the GCSE requirements, English and math can be retaken, okay, as to meet the minimum requirements. However, the resitting of other GCSE subjects is not accepted unless there are significant mitigating circumstances. Okay.
Just a quick one, guys. Sorry to interrupt again, Bobby. With the resits as well, it's also important to know if you're planning to resit A levels, it really depends on what you got the first time around as well. Now, there is not a huge amount of universities out there that will allow you to apply without mitigating circumstances, but there are definitely a few, handful, that if you got like AAB the first time or AAC, they might consider you if you get an A or an A star in the third subject. Now, this is something you can search up and find in their admissions policies. One example is Holyoke Medical School. Another one is Exeter. Off the top of my head as well, I believe Brighton also used to allow it. That may have changed, but you can find a lot of these. And the thing is, generally you need mitigating circumstances, but even if you don't have them, you can actually fill 4 spots in certain years because you only need 4 universities, technically speaking. So do have a very careful look. So if you've got A star, A, B, for example, right now, and you've got a really good UCAT score and you're thinking, should I apply or should I not? Perhaps you can apply, just be very selective. Yeah. And back to you, Bobby.
Thank you. So yes, retaking A levels is a little bit trickier, I'd say. So as Ashley said, there are certain universities that you can apply to, and they're a little bit more free with what you apply, what resets you do. Others require you to have gotten AAB or AAC the first time, whatever it might be. So again, there's something to look at. Someone said that I've not taken any GCSEs in England, stated above. The ones I have are abroad and date back to 1992. Would taking English, maths, and 3 sciences in England be considered resitting? That's quite a complex question. Ashley, do you have any ideas on that one? I would say that the best way to find out is actually by speaking to the university you're interested in applying to via the admissions. I think if you've done them abroad and you don't already have an equivalent, then it would be sort of doing it the first time. If you did them back in 1992, they'll also be different now. So I would suggest that resitting would be fine, but I'd want to double check that with the admissions officers. Okay. Grade 8 is marked as 4 points. Someone who was asking about that. 9 and 8 are 4. Okay. And then people asking about resitting A levels, we've already discussed that. Fine. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to mention was that there's another university, sorry, this one is they do not accept band 4 for SJT. So quite a few universities have a requirement that you at least get a band 3 or above. Some are more selective and say you have to get a band 2 and above with SJT. So please do be very cautious about that. Again, you don't want to be falling at the first hurdle of you've applied, but actually terms and conditions, the fine print are saying you don't fit the criteria. Okay. Should I consider Leicester with a UCAS score of 2,720? Again, because they take into consideration so many different things, I would not want to make that judgment without having an idea of what else you do. So just to keep us going, the other university I wanted to briefly discuss, sorry, click back, was Plymouth. So Plymouth is quite unique because it doesn't really consider in the first part of the shortlisting your GCSEs or your A levels. What it does consider is your UCAT score. And again, I'd say it's quite a harsh boundary they draw, but it's for a good reason. Because there are so many students applying, they need to have a way of selecting the people they're going to interview. Okay. This is a screenshot from their website to look at what their entry cutoffs were. Now, be aware the cutoff score isn't necessarily there to say if you get above it, you will absolutely get a place. No, it's one piece of information and it's how they decide who they interview. After you've gotten to interview, you'll then be ranked on your interviewing, and also you will have been ranked according to your cutoff. Well, sorry, not your cutoff, your UCAT score. So it's one piece of information, but it's the first important piece that you address. Okay. So as you can see from this trend, we sort of start off at 2,400 as being the cutoff, which seems about average. Okay. And then we had a bit of a jump in 2022 to 2,600. Again, we could theorize that's possibly to do with COVID, thinking about people's predicted grades, everyone getting their predicted grades, more people wanting to apply for medicine and things like this. And we see a little bit of a downtick again, but because that is really hard to predict because we've had this massive change in the last few years. If you were someone who was desperate to apply to Plymouth and you sort of came out of your UCAT with 2,800, you'd probably have a good shot because you'd still be sort of comfortably above their normal average of 2,500, quite a bit, by about 300 points. But I wouldn't recommend that you apply to Plymouth if you scored 2,200 because you just would not get over that first hurdle of the cutoff score. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, fine. So let's have a look at some questions. Why is 2024 saying cutoff 2,210? I could not tell you exactly why. So as I said, we're theorizing that sort of 2022 and 2023. If we look at the statistics and the sort of context of that time, it's just post-COVID. A lot of students got their predicted grades during that time, so there was more competition, so they had to push it higher. The other thing is you had people deferring and trying to join the next year because they didn't want to be doing things remotely, which unfortunately was a consequence of having to isolate. So there were fewer places on offer. So it became more and more competitive to try and be more selective with students. Okay. So your first step is checking that you meet the requirements, just to make that clear to someone who says they were a little bit confused. Okay. Your first step is checking, do I meet the requirements of this university? Yes, no. If you don't apply to it. That's what we mean by strategic approach. You're applying to ones that you are actually eligible for and have a good shot applying to. So as I said, if you've got 2,800 on UCAT, you have a good shot, I'd say, of Plymouth. But if you scored maybe 2,300, you'd have less of a solid shot. So I may not go for that, but it depends on the other aspects of your application. If you then have really strong GCSEs and really strong A levels, well, I might suggest you apply for Leicester or a university that considers those aspects a bit more. Okay. And these are just two examples. Someone said, you mentioned they don't consider A's and A levels and GCSEs initially, do they go out from later? So most universities do check because they, well, for one, they have a minimum requirement for your A levels. So the minimum requirements tend to be ABB or BBB, with requirement of you having sat chemistry and biology or biology at A level. So you will need to meet those criteria at some point. GCSE requirements, you must meet the sort of basic maths and English requirements. That's sort of a legal thing, I think. So those are things that are taken into consideration. If they then have two applicants who are both performing equally well at interview, both performed very well at UCAT equally, and their A levels are the same, they might then go back to GCSEs to try and find a way to differentiate between candidates. They are trying to be very selective, but also objective so that no one's unfairly biased. Okay. If you've got 2,810, the cutoff is 2,820, for example, can you still apply? No. The cutoffs are definitive. And so if you were to apply with any number below, even 1 point below the sort of cutoff, you would be rejected. So it's not worth using your space for that. Okay, fine. We've spoken a little bit about resitting A levels and the fact that this is a possibility for certain universities. But again, this is more competitive because there are fewer spots available if you are going to resit. Okay. Again, just a reminder, the subjects that are needed are really chemistry and biology at A level. Okay. And most universities will require you to have done at least one, but probably both. And you need to be getting an A in at least one of them, if not A's in both. Okay. Sorry, just checking. Where do we get the UCAT cutoff information, please? That will be on the admissions websites of the different universities. Okay. So that's your A levels. Now, most universities consider that you must sit all three A levels within 2 years. Okay. So that's your sort of school, your sixth form or your college time within those 2 years. You can't spread it out so you sort of do two in the first year and then, one separately, whatever. Or do one a year. You have to do them within a defined period of time. So if you're going to resit it, I believe the rule is that you have to have done it within 3 years. And again, this comes down to the mitigating circumstances. They want you to not be sort of forgetting that knowledge by the time that you start again. So that's why that's so strict as well. Okay. Try the websites, but it's also likely some universities do not disclose their threshold. Most of them do disclose some information regarding their threshold. And I will only say that the information available tends to be from previous years because they're still coming up with decisions on the current cohort based on how well people have performed. So if everyone were to suddenly perform a lot worse, they'd move the cutoff down. If everyone to perform a lot better, they'd move it upwards. So again, it's all about competition level during the year you apply. Okay. Fine. So BMAT University switching to UCAT. How will the BMAT universities use the UCAT? This is again a tricky question because this is sort of the first year we're going to see this happen. Next year we'll have more data, slightly more, not a lot more. But because of this, it's a bit more of a gamble. I would suggest that if you're going to apply for a university that's historically done BMAT with your UCAT, it needs to be a strong UCAT score. I would be aiming personally for about 2,800 in my UCAT. Again, there will be some nuances as to whether or not they take into consideration GCSEs or A levels, or if they take into consideration all three personal statements. That's going to be on their website. They have to give you some information. It's a requirement to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity. But in terms of how your UCAT will fit into the equation, we just can't say properly right now. But I would say if you want to give it a punt, which is completely fine, you need to make sure you have a strong UCAT score. Not average, but strong to optimize your opportunity. Okay. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about alternative ways into medicine. And to do this, I first want to sort of give you guys a bit of my story because I think that might be helpful. I applied for medicine as an undergraduate the first time around, and I did have an offer, but I didn't meet my offer of my A levels. Something I learned from that was you can resit the UCAT as many times as you like, but if your A levels aren't good enough, you're probably not going to get in for undergrad. So I was a little bit stuffed, and I had to go to my backup choice, and my backup choice was originally biomedical sciences at Cardiff. So I went there thinking that's the end of it. I don't have a route back into medicine. There is another route into medicine. Okay. You can do a degree. It can be sciencey, it can be artsy. It doesn't really matter too much, but you can do a degree and then do medicine as a second degree. There are financial implications involved with this, such that you get slightly less funding from the government in later years, but you do get support from the NHS bursary. And if you want to go down that route, I'd say do a bit more research before you do make the application. The caveat is you can apply for undergraduate courses, and in some ways, graduates tend to be more competitive because you had that life experience and time to do the entrance exam again and sort of get your head around, okay, what went wrong last time. Graduates tend to perform better. Because of that, the cutoff for graduate courses tends to go up. But because you're competing against undergraduates, if you're applying as a graduate, your score is going to appear higher than their normal cutoff score. So it's slightly more competitive in that sense. However, the funding, again, available from the government is much less. So you have to be in a good financial position to be able to support yourself a bit more during those first few years. So you're eligible to apply for either of those. Some universities do require you to have done a science before you do graduate entry medicine. So, for example, Oxford do. Imperial College did last time I checked. But other universities, you're able to do history, you're able to do engineering, you're able to do law before you do medicine. So if you wanted to take the time to explore something else because you didn't quite get there the first time, you are able to do that. And it won't disadvantage you. Okay. It'll take you a bit longer, but it won't disadvantage you. Alternatively, you are able to think about applying abroad. Okay. Okay. And different universities abroad will again have different cutoff scores and different requirements. But some people find this is an easier way in, as they tend to have slightly lower A-level requirements and things. Do double check the requirements of the different universities you're applying to abroad as well, because although they may have slightly lower A-level requirements or slightly lower UCAT requirements, they will be asking for something else. And sort of leading into that, Warwick, for example, again, think about the graduate course, they require you to have done X number of hours of work experience. So it's really important that you do meet that requirement, or again, you'll be rejected that first stage. Okay. Fine. If you don't get into medical school in the first time, but apply to another degree as a fifth choice and get an offer, can you go and do the degree for a year, come during your gap year, and then redo your UCAT and apply? You can do that. So I have a friend who did that in their first year. So first year they joined biomedical sciences at Cardiff, and then they reapplied to medicine, having done the UCAT again, and then they went straight into medicine. Okay, fine. I am answering the questions in the chat as best as I can, so I will scroll back up in a moment. But if you do have any questions, please do also use the Mentimeter. I'm just going to scroll through the questions in the chat. And if Ashley, if you have anything to add, please do. Okay. Someone said they aren't able to see my screen. I hope you can see it now. The lowest UCAT score known that someone had gotten and into medicine. Well, I mean, looking at the data we had from Leicester, the lowest score that someone got was 2,210, I think it was. I can go back to that slide in a moment. It was 2000, sorry, that was Plymouth, I think. Again, if you go onto the UCAT, into the admission pages, the UCAT score, the cutoff score will be listed, and you'll be able to get an idea of what the lowest amount they'll accept is. If you're scoring a 59 on the point system for Leicester, yes, you can apply again. Sorry, you can apply. You might want to be a little bit wary because, as I said, last year their cutoff was 59, or at least the year before was. And so just be a little bit cautious. You might want to be a little bit more confident in your other choices. Would 55 points get you into Leicester? I would be a little bit hesitant to apply with 55 points because we know that although 52 points was, in fact, yes, 52 points was last year, and then before that in 58, 59. We don't know if it's going to go back up again because we have had this change in sort of demographic of people applying. Is resitting AS levels okay? I don't think most universities actually consider AS levels anymore, so it's important that it's the A level, the full A level, and because of that time constraint of you have to do it within 2 years, I wouldn't say that resitting your AS level is a safe bet either, so double check before you make that decision. This webinar will be sent out. I'm looking at universities in Scotland and they do not seem to mention the UCAS points. Is this not for all unis? No, this isn't for all unis. The UCAS points are different from points I was talking about. So the points I was talking about are the points assigned by the university based on the information you provide to them. So they'll do their own points system. And so the universities in Scotland, I don't know which one you're looking at, may have an alternative. So unis would previously use the BMAP, which changes to UCAT. How do you find that the cut-off score? We don't have actually any data for this right now. So unfortunately, all I can say is you want to be aiming for something that is above average. And the reason I'm saying this is it's possible that because these tend to be the more competitive universities, so Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, those are ones that used to use BMAP and now will use UCAT. Because they are more competitive before switching, they're still going to be competitive. So that's why I'm saying try and aim for a higher amount if you can. Would it be worth applying to medicine with predicted grades BBB? Again, if you've done some widening participation programs, absolutely, that's a really good way. Thank you to Shigeru who said that. But again, it's going to depend. If it's a contextual offer, they often give you lower grades, and I think the lowest contextual offer I've ever seen is BBB. So even if you got your predicted, that's fantastic. And you could still get in. The alternative is, if you're not sure about applying with predicted, is to wait until you've got the actual grades yourself and then have a gap year and then apply after your gap year so that you have the grades which are AAA or whatever they might be to apply with. So someone said, since Imperial has a minimum requirement of AAA, but gives offers A-star AA, is applying with A-star AA going to be more competitive than applying with AAA? So the minimum requirement Imperial have is a triple A. However, once you're given an offer, you need to meet the offer. And I know that Imperial are quite notorious for not really budging on that, even if they have a minimum which is triple A rather than A-star AA. So what happens is on the day you get your results, what you can do is call up the university if you have an offer from them and say, hi, I didn't quite get my offer, but I still got above your minimum requirement. Can I still come? Some universities will say yes. Imperial is one that may say no, historically, from what I've heard from students. Okay. So ideally, you want to be applying with an A-star AA, I think, for that one. So someone was asking about attainment scores. If you go to a less well-off area for your education, you may get contextualized performance and contextualized offer or contextualized view on your application. Okay. If you don't go to these, you are going to be held to a higher standard. So I'd say it's probably a little bit risky to the person who's asked about this to be applying if you're only 0.4 above. Okay. Okay. And I'm just going to look through the questions on Menti. I know there's still some on the chat, but I just want to make sure everyone's got as many as they've covered. How can you improve your UCAT score in a week? That's tough because a week is not a lot of time. If you're doing a week of solid UCAT prep, again, I would ask myself, is there an area of the UCAT I'm really struggling with? Is there a particular way I can address this? So for VR, I always recommend to my students spend at least 10 minutes a day reading, so you're improving your reading speed. This is all about marginal gains, and it does help. And it also improves your comprehension speed. Okay. For things like QR, I would say do mental maths every day, because the more mental maths you can do, rather than having to use the clunky UCAT calculator, the faster you're going to be, and so the better you're going to do. These are tweaks you can make to your technique, and we again do have more technique tutorials available, and that's sort of the fundamental. But within a week, it's really hard to sort of target your technique so much. At this point, I would be focusing a lot more on practice and stamina. So you make sure you're doing full mocks, not just subsection mocks. So don't just do QR or AR separately. Do the full thing because it's a long exam. And if you've not done it through once before, minimum, you're going to find it very tiring and may not do as well as you want. Okay. Do universities outside England give more preference to local students? Some of them do. Some of them will, it's almost like a contextual offer. They'll reduce the offer or the minimum requirement for that university if you are a national of Wales or a national of Scotland. That will be explicitly stated within the university admissions requirements because it's a requirement by law that they have to. I got BBB at A-level research as a graduate. Would this negatively impact my application? It depends if there's contextual information behind that. So did you have mitigating circumstances? Also, how far away you are from your A-levels. So actually, I do know people personally who got BBB at A-level years ago. They've done PhDs, they've come back, and they've had whole careers as civil servants and things like this. And what's more important is what you've done in the recent history that's applicable to your application at the time. I hope that helps. So this depends on how long you've been out of education or out of A levels and what you've done in the meantime. But at Cambridge, it says someone with a low UCAT score predicted 3 A stars and a good personal statement. Because Oxford and Cambridge are sort of your higher tier universities, they're going to be more competitive. And it's usually the more competitive a university is, the more important each individual aspect of your application will be. So you want to be aiming for not average UCAT scores. You want to be getting a high UCAT score, high A-level predictions, fantastic. And a good personal statement, also really important. What I will say is if you have really high predicted A levels and you don't have the other stuff behind you, I've had people be rejected because of the other stuff, things like GCSEs not being quite up to standard, because they have to find a way to narrow down the student applications. How can you write a personal statement? Any examples? So this is really thinking about what do you want to demonstrate? You want to be reflecting on your work experience and being explicit that it's reflection. You want to be demonstrating what you've learned is important for medicine and how you fit into medicine. This is something that I could talk for several hours about, to be honest with you. I would start with a broad statement as to why you want to do medicine. And then I would evidence what skills you have that would fit you to medicine and how you know that they fit you to medicine. So what work experience, what have you seen, etc. And then sort of the final paragraph talking about other parts that you've explored yourself. So of anything. So if you're someone who likes singing or swimming, whatever you do outside of medicine, to show you are a well-rounded individual. That's really important. And I think there's been a lot more emphasis on that in recent years. I think I've sort of covered that. Mature student applying to undergraduate who's been doing access to medicine course, please. I think St George's is a good one for a graduate who's applying to undergraduate courses, and also Manchester. But again, I think check your personal criteria. What have you got to offer, and what their criteria is. This is much more of a personalized question, I think. So I apologize, I can't give you specifics. So you have two options. You can apply this year for this person with what you have. I'd apply strategically if I did this. Or you can take the gap year and try again. You may not get a higher score second time round. The other thing is you could also just do both of those. So apply this time round, but apply strategically. And if you get an offer, great. If you're happy to go there, even better. If you don't get an offer and you're sort of stuck with a gap year, well, your second option is still there. It again depends on whether or not you consider doing a second degree. We're sort of running out of time now, so I'm really trying to get through as many as I can. Yes, you need some proof for extenuating circumstances. There is specific detailed procedures, guidelines on the admissions website, so have a look at that. Which use aspirational, because my grades in UCAT are good, but I'm not sure how well my personal statement interviews will do. So the first step is getting an interview. So ignore how you're doing an interview at the moment. Okay, focus on the other stuff. Your grades in your UCAT are good. Work on your personal statement. Get lots and lots of people's opinions. The more people, the better. And if they're happy with it and you're happy with it, the universities which you think are aspirational are going to be the ones that seem more competitive statistically, which you get by looking. And there's nothing wrong for applying with them if you meet the criteria. The ones that are slightly easier to get into are probably your safer strategic options. That's not to say you shouldn't apply for things that you're aspirational about. If you haven't started your personal statement, it's not the end of the world. You have time, but I'd get started on it now. You don't have that much time left. Is it okay to resit one exam at U-level? Again, I think we've covered this quite a bit, but it depends on the circumstances and the university you're planning to apply to. When should you begin revising for the UCAT? We typically advise at least 4 to 6 weeks before, if not 8, really. 8 is a good solid amount of time. And unfortunately, not everyone has that opportunity. So again, this is probably hard if someone's got an exam in September and that's why they were asking. You do what you can do. If you're planning to apply next year, I'd say give yourself a solid 8 weeks.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt. I think we're going to have to end the webinar there because we have another dentistry one straight after this now. So we just need to move on to that. That's okay. Guys, if you enjoyed this session and if you're happy to, we are picking one student out at random, whoever leaves us feedback, to get a free consultation. If you can leave this for a quick 2 minutes, just scan the QR code. And if you've done that, just click done or just write done in the Zoom chat with the name. You don't have to leave your name as long as your name matches up with the name that you used to register for today. We'll basically contact you and email you if you've been selected. But just say done in the Zoom chat if you've finished that so I know who's completed that and we can enter you into that draw.
Okay, so that's all wrapping up today. Thank you all for coming along. I hope that was useful and I hope that your questions have been answered.
Thank you so much for today, Bobby.
No
I'm
worries.
sure the students found that very useful. And like I say, if you guys are interested in any further support, we can provide that consultation to you. We are having another webinar on the 7th of September. We'll be using a few different students as an example, just to give you a bit of an idea of what you guys can do, okay? But we'll end the webinar there. And again, thank you so much, Bobby, for that. And yeah, everybody enjoy your evening.